My name is Adam Kennaugh, and I am a collaborative composer. Join me in the search for a career in classical music. This is the Making Noise podcast.
I love the idea of it. Like a lot of they had the saxophone studio class, just like this collaboration through not necessarily performance. It's a pretty neat thing that we're dealing with and being able to make it work.
Yeah, and that's the great thing too, actually, like sort of the silver lining within, well, I don't even say it's silver lining, but one of the upsides with what's happening with the quarantine is like being able to do this. It's like, you know what, let's reach out to people, let's just talk, you know?
Yeah, there's so much to be gained because we're so in our like focus, like this is my performance I got coming up, this is what I need to practice, this is what I have to write, this is what I have to publish, even if you're like a scholar. But now everything's like, how can I keep building and growing and staying optimistic with none of what I was doing for the past X amount of years? So, good thing we have technology the way we do.
Yeah, and I like that. I like what you said there. I mean, it's definitely providing us, like, you know, being able to have this conversation or whoever else you're communicating with, and then reconnecting with everyone and just sort of like checking in, because now I feel like this can sort of grow and continue where now it'll just sort of be commonplace between people within our community to just stay connected. And so like Zoom calls and whatnot, even when things, you know, when we can start actually interacting on a regular basis again without the concern of a virus, I imagine, I hope that something like this would continue, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because it's kind of forced everyone to become adept to technology. Like, I'm not very technologically inclined. And I know there are some people that are super, super techy that were like, this was normal for them. But everyone has been forced into being able to do it. So I hope it becomes a normal means of communication.
Yeah. What's that saying? Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man.
We all have to adapt. So, yeah. But so the other day, I don't know what made me check it out, but I pulled up the recording of Initial Contact.
Yeah.
And I listened to it, and I was following the score and everything, and I was like, I was so excited because you guys just nailed it.
Yeah.
Like it's such an abstract piece, especially stepping outside of standard notation, you know?
Right.
And so I just sort of wanted to sit down and talk and just kind of like revisit it and like get ourselves back in that headspace of in 2015 and in June of 2015 when we first met.
Oh, dude, 5 years ago almost. Like,
yeah, actually it was over 5 years ago.
Crazy, man. Yeah,
it is crazy.
Cool. Yeah, that whole 2-week thing, like, it's something I will never forget. And it was like a stepping point in my journey as a musician into like this new world that I didn't know existed. And stuff like that. So yeah, it was super cool, super memorable.
I had a similar like experience where it was so impactful for me that it was, like you said, a stepping point. But like, how was it a stepping point for you? Like, what did it do in regards to you as a musician and a saxophonist?
Yeah, so like I went to a very small undergraduate university where like chamber music was sort of there, but it wasn't, and like especially mixed chamber. Like we had a couple saxophone quartets and there's a couple brass ensembles, but it's a very, I would consider it just traditional school of thought with like their music, and no one really steps out of this classical canon box. Like you play the standard band rep, you play the standard solo rep. And the whole thing came to be is because Dr. Adams' quartet, the Estrella Consort, did a masterclass at SVSU. I played in it, and she's like, "Oh, you're really into sort of contemporary music?" I was like, "Yeah, I love it, and I want to like fulfill that spot that I'm not necessarily filling here at my undergrad." And she invited me to come to Nief-Norf, and I did it. I just out of a whim, I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And just like being exposed to these kind of musicians, like-minded musicians, and people that are there for the common goal of just making music, opposed to like, and I would like to think that everyone in college that's a music major is there to make music, but some of it's formality. Like, I need to do this because I need to do this to get the degree to be a band director or to be a performer or to do X, Y, and Z that you can do with a music degree. Where here it was all about just getting together and making music and collaborating together. And I'd never done anything like that. I was very much within like the first 2 days realized I was punching above my weight, so to speak, in regards of just like the expectations of performance and the understanding of how chamber ensembles work, just the verbal communications that are needed. But yeah, just all of that, just like, I felt like I played my part. I did not necessarily exceed expectations in my mind. I was very underprepared for all of that, but it really lit a fire to pursue and continue learning these ideas and styles of music and collaborations like chamber ensembles and stuff. So it really just kind of set the tone for me to work on that stuff, which then ended up leading for me to want to pursue a graduate degree.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there that I think a lot of people, their experience of Nief-Norf is I have no doubt is similar, because it was like you were saying, like it was such a high intensity of the work ethic. Like you had to be, you know, especially as performers, you were rehearsing all day, every day, and then performing like every other night.
Yeah.
You know, and it was so great. Like, you know, you said you were hitting above your weight class and stuff like that, but I thought you handled it completely like a professional. You know, I never would have thought that you were in any sort of sense like uncomfortable or anything. Tired and exhausted, yeah, but you know.
Yeah, and it was just one of those things, and I feel like I try to carry this mentality into anything I do, even if I'm well in above my head, just to know what I can do well and try to get better at what I can't. So like in some of the pieces, not necessarily initial contact that I played in, like I really made sure what I didn't know or wasn't comfortable with, that I made it as good as I could. And the stuff that I was good at, I just kind of glossed over a little bit. Not that I wasn't prepared of it, but just making sure that I could present a professional product, even though I was uncomfortable with some of it from a preparation standpoint.
Yeah, well, even like you said before, your upbringing in Saginaw, like you had a kind of more traditional background and stuff, and stepping into some of these things. I mean, even though it was there was a lot of minimalist music like Philip Glass and such, there was still quite a bit that was, I mean, well, even that though, like I remember when you played, was it like Music in Fifths or something like that?
Yeah, yep, that's the one that I was on.
Right, that piece, like I couldn't, the stamina for that, man. The stamina was like, oh
Yeah.
my God.
And that also sparked a whole thought of just like mental focus. Because the exact moment, if you quit focusing, because I know I had done it in rehearsal a couple times, because like it'd be like 8 or 9 at night, and we've been rehearsing all day. As soon as I like for a millisecond wasn't engaged in what was going on, it was done. I was like out of it. So that like was a learning experience into just everyday practice now of how to stay mentally engaged the whole time. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that occurred those 2 weeks that just really set up the continued growth of my musicianship.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I didn't think of it like that so much. Like you said, that focus then translated into how you have to focus within your practice sessions and rehearsals and such. How has that, I mean, now that you finished grad school and stuff, like I imagine there's been a lot of shifts and pivots that you've made throughout that time, but what did that moment do for you in regards to where you are now? Would you say, like, what is one thing, if you can grab onto one thing from that time at Nief-Norf from 2015, like what do you think that thing might be that has made you the musician you are right now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think it's something that I still struggle with to this day in my preparation, is it doesn't have to be perfect. strive for perfection, and we want to play it as good as we can, but we're always growing as musicians and we're always getting better at something. So the idea of just putting on a product as good as you can at the time that you have to do it, because with Nief-Norf, there were, like you said, there were concerts every other day.
Yeah.
And you're prepping sometimes huge work, sometimes not so huge, but like it was literally play a concert that night and like, woo, yay, we had an awesome concert. And then literally the next morning, you're like, all right, shift gears and we have 2 days until we perform this piece. And just getting that as good as you can as a performer at the time you are in your career for that performance. Because like you could spend your whole lifetime trying to make a piece perfect, but I don't think a piece is ever perfect, and never will. It never will be. But I think that's what makes music so cool is and unique, is that we're always striving to make ourselves better, and we try to never become complacent. So that really was a huge thing I took out of that, is just try to go from performance to performance and do as well as you can at the time at the place you are at that current time as a musician.
That's fantastic, man. I mean that totally sounds like a performer's boot camp in a way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, because like we as musicians, and I think I can speak for a vast majority of musicians, is we listen to the recordings of the masters or the professors, and we think that's how we have to play it. This is the level that I have to achieve. And you might be able to do that. You might not be able to do that, but everyone's at a different point in their journey. And you just have to realize that this is where I'm at. This is where I've come from. That's the big thing that people don't acknowledge, is where I've come from. They're looking at how short I am from where I need to be. And just like, okay, I've come from here. So that's awesome. So now what do I need to do to take the next step to get to here in our playing? And because we compare ourselves. I mean, that's just that's what keeps us driven, is listening to these professors and these professionals and trying to achieve where they are, but we're just at a point in our musical journey. And then through all of that, it's just kind of relating back to Nief-Norf, like just doing what you can at that given point for that performance.
That's yeah, man, there's a lot in that right there. I mean, especially the whole idea of critique is, you know, going to music school and stuff, all of us as performers, composers, you know, music educators and everything, it's like we're actually trained to critique and be self-critical, and in many ways that can be damaging, you know, because it's like you're always thinking about, oh my God, this isn't as good as it could be and this needs to be better. But like you were just saying, you know, it just needs to be good enough, you know?
Yeah.
And I think a part of that is, it makes me think about composers like Boulez and Bruckner, right? Like they were notorious for making revisions in their works, because like most artists, it's like you look back on this thing that you did. Like if you did a recording and you could look back and be like, oh no, that was terrible phrasing, or like the micro phrasing within that was way too much, you know? And so they'll go back and they'll revise it because they're like, this could be better. But then there are artists too, like I hear this with a lot of actors, and actors often say, I don't watch any of the movies that I make, because, and I imagine it's because like the product, it's done. Right. And they'll look back at it and be like, the way I delivered that line was trash, you know, but they can't do anything about it because the product is made. So right. It's, yeah.
I think with like listening to old recordings, it's the same way. And like, oh, I missed that note, or that note was out of tune, but you're focusing on one little aspect of a 15-minute concerto or something, where if you were to take a recording of that concerto, you know, 3 years earlier and compare them, there would be so much on the one negative of it. I don't know, it's something I think all musicians struggle with, and we all kind of cope with, and it's just finding that balance to make it not debilitating to the point where you just become depressed about your ability to make music or write music.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I know, even like for me personally, that's one of the struggles I have. It's because like I'm always in, you know, that saying, you're looking at the trees and not the forest sort of thing. you know, so you're stuck in the weeds, but you can't see the bigger picture, and being inside of that every day, it can be you know, self-debilitating, I guess. But that's great advice, man. And I think you're making some really great, like, you're dropping some bombs, you know.
Yeah, and then one last thing to add on to that is, I think perfection is not necessarily the thing to strive for, because by trying to achieve perfection in regards to like intonation and articulation, you lose the emotion sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. So again, striking that balance of playing emotionally and with feeling, opposed to micromanaging every technical aspect of a given passage. That's another thing that through like my reflection, I didn't realize it at the time with Nief-Norf, is like, play this note, play it in time, play it in tune, but then you lose some part of that music, even though technically, if you were to like put it into a computer, 100%, you got 100% on your test, it loses something.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that's something I thought a little bit about, and I think what it actually loses is the human element. Like, you know, bands like Animals as Leaders.
I'm not familiar now.
Or I don't know. I mean, really, a lot of mainstream pop music is, it's so produced, right? To the point where it's like this polished product, and so like auto-tune and quantization and all these things that try to perfectly align the music from within the software that it's being recorded into. It almost makes it sound robotic, you know?
Right.
And I'm not trying to criticize any pop music or anything like that.
Sure.
But what I am kind of pointing out with this is it's like what you were just saying, you know, like that level of perfection, and then being able to be okay with whatever it is that you're doing as best as you can at that time. And I think music like that, where it's like very produced and stuff, for me is kind of sterile, because it doesn't have that human element of imperfection,
right?
You know, like the little subtleties of how a note enters, and like, you know, if you're playing from niente and you're doing this multiphonic, there's going to be like probably some air present, you know, and then as that multiphonic grows, the air will probably be less, or something less present, and so and that's something that you're going to get just from the fact that a human is making this thing, you know.
Yeah, dude, absolutely.
But you mentioned something earlier that you said, you know, trying to perfectly get the notes in tune and getting all the right rhythms and stuff, and you know, the interpretation of the piece, whatever. It's funny you say that, because like none of those things so much is present in initial contact.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of, the piece kind of exposes every one of those elements in the sense of indeterminacy. Is there is no quote unquote perfect way to do it, which is super cool. And I never played anything that was indeterminate, except for like that middle school band piece where there's like pick your own note for one note kind of thing. But yeah, that was something I'd never been exposed to. I kind of like read about it in a book, in my history books, about like all this indeterminate music, and allowing the performer to choose was another new experience that I experienced at Nief-Norf, was working on initial contact.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's interesting, man. I'm curious, like, what was your thoughts when you first had the score, and like and we're looking at it, like, did you remember what your experience was with that?
Yeah, because we were in the same dorm area, and I saw you working on it, and it was just like, my thoughts were, how am I going to do this in regards of like, in giving it what you wanted, also while also satisfying what I think is good for it, for the piece, and performing it as I want. And then the second thought is, how in the world are we going to do this together? But again, with no experience, like, I look at a standard piece of music, it's like the rhythms are there, the notes are there, the dynamic, like it's reading a book word for word. It tells you what you need to do. Where this is the complete opposite. It's like, here's about what I want you to do.
Right.
So yeah, just my first thought was like, how am I gonna do this? While still giving it the justice that it deserves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I would have probably had the same exact thought. I probably would have been frightened. Like, I don't know what the hell to do with this, man. Like, but that was something, one thing that I appreciated so much with this is all of like you, as in the performers, like you, Amanda, Eric, and Kevin, like all of you you like jumped right in, you dug it up and like you took it, you know. And one thing that I love, I love the one memory I have, I think it was the first rehearsal in like that, you know, that little room we were in.
Yeah.
And I think wasn't Allison was the coach, right?
Yep, Dr. Adams.
Yeah. By the end of the rehearsal, there was just ripped newspaper everywhere.
Yeah, I remember maybe the first rehearsal after we were like, all right, let's go find some more newspaper. We have rehearsal again tomorrow. Yeah, man, it was something. Like, I think we all came in like, all right, super open-minded, and then you were super flexible with what you were looking for, which was awesome, opposed to like, this is exactly what I want. Mm-hmm. And as a collaborative effort, we all just had fun with it and made something happen with it.
Yeah. Oh man, it was such a cool thing. I mean, like you were saying earlier with Nief-Norf, that the whole community aspect of it. I mean, where there was rehearsals each day, performances every other night, but every night we would almost go out to get drinks and stuff and like hang out and everything. So it was like, I think all of that sort of bled together to create these like, you know, it like expedited the process of building relationships with people. So then when we finally went back into rehearsals and stuff, it was like, we all felt a little bit more comfortable with one another. We were that much closer to understanding what it is that we're doing, you know, in a sort of accelerated way, you know?
Yeah. Cause like I've played with like even community bands or hired for other gigs, and you show up and if you have a rehearsal, like you showed up, you rehearse, you go home. Like you sometimes don't even get to know the names of everyone that you're working with. And Nief-Norf was like, you get to be with all these people for 2 weeks and you get to know who they are, where they're from, and try to relate where you're from and what you've done and learn from their experiences as maybe they can also learn from yours. Yeah, it's just like a huge melting pot of musicians, because there were people from all over the country.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the things you said earlier is totally resonates with me when you said that being in this environment with like-minded people, you know, and like that was exactly what I got too. I mean, even within our suite that you and I had, it was me, you, Greg, and then Joe was LaRocco, right?
LaRocco, yeah.
LaRocco, yeah. And like all of us vibed really well. And then, you know, Eric Retterer, or I don't know how to say his last name, the percussionist, Hannah Meyer, the cellist, like Jordan, percussion, right? Like all of us, you know, it was there, like all of us we just clicked really well, you know. And there were of course a lot of other people too, and then the faculty as well that were there. I remember Andrea Lodge and Jay Eckhart and just sort of I mean, it was that the whole thing, just getting to work with people who everyone is just so interested in creating this new music and stuff, you know. That was one of the biggest things that I got from that. And like, and obviously today, like here you and I we're still talking, you know, like 5 years later.
Yeah.
That's just fantastic.
That's the awesome thing about music too, is you do a performance or you collaborate with somebody one time for one thing at one place, And that's not necessarily the end of that collaboration, even if it was literally barely getting to know their names and you moving on, because it's such a small niche community that it's all about these connections.
Mhm.
You never know what's going to lead to what.
That's so
And
true, man.
they're gonna cross.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously, like with our history and stuff like that, it's like because of Nief-Norf, you and I became pals, and then you were like, "Hey, man, you want to write me a piece for my senior recital?" I'm like, "Let's do it." And then that was the birth of Crepuscular Light. You
Yeah.
know? And like for me as a composer, that's actually been one of my most performed pieces. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and today, like we're still working on some projects together, and so but all that came from both of us applying to a festival in Knoxville, Tennessee, that it was our first sort of exposure to any of this sort, like this whole world, you know.
Yeah, and then small world, because you're from New Jersey, you end up doing your graduate degree at Bowling Green, which is closer to where I was, and then I did my graduate degree with a graduate of Bowling Green, and just this whole intertwined community of music and everything. Yeah.
It's so crazy. I mean, I say this all the time to people in the new music community, but it's true, is that the new music community, it's so small. Like the 6 degrees of separation, or 6 degrees of separation from one person to the next, it's not that far, you know.
No.
I mean, like all of us are only so far away from, like, I don't know, Philip Glass, you know, or like, you know, even you, like you did that thing for Steve Reich, you know, like,
yeah,
like 2 degrees of separation. Now what? Not even, like you guys maybe are like getting coffee. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and it's crazy just how everything works. Because like Jordan ended up doing a performance at Oakland where I was doing my graduate degree, and I was like, oh man, crazy, small world. And then Dr. Zula came into a sabbatical semester there, and you had contact with him at Bowling Green. Now you're both living in Chicago, and it's just like it's a world that just ever evolves. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting too for that reason. And just sort of watching how everyone, you know, the paths that everyone takes and what we're all doing and stuff. But I mean, but yeah, and that's why, like, when I look back at when I think back to Nief-Norf that summer and like working through initial contact and stuff, it's like such a cherished time to think about for me. And this piece specifically, like in my catalog of works, it's the only piece I've ever written that does what it does. It's the only piece I've written that, well, I have written like maybe 1 or 2 other pieces that uses tablature notation. This is the only one I've written that strictly uses tablature notation, you know, where it's like the notation is telling you the actions that you make, not the sound you're making.
Right.
Like which is standard notation. And kind of looking back at it, it's made it like, it makes me think a lot about, you know, like you said a moment ago, like the trajectory of that all of us are taking, really, but like you and I, as individuals and as collaborators and stuff. But so I was looking at the score, and I'm gonna see if I can share my screen with you because I have it pulled up right here. Let's see here. Share screen. All right. So can you see this right here?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Yeah. Now we're going big. So here's your part, the performance notes for your part.
Yeah.
And I was looking at this and I was like, oh my God, I'm such a prick. Like, so just to, if we end up sharing this with the world and posting it on some, you know, whatever, YouTube, whatever, just to give a brief explanation real quick. So this is the staff that the saxophone is reading, right?
Yes.
And this line here and this line here represents, as I wrote, position of the mouthpiece and air pressure. So what it basically means is that these boxes, wherever they're positioned within this space, is where the mouth should be positioned on the mouthpiece. So the closer to this line, that means it's going to be the tip of the mouthpiece. And then closer to this line means like full mouthpiece. And it's all explained right here. But if I recall, didn't we sort of eliminate that for the performance, that whole idea?
Yeah, well, what we ended up doing because of just the constraints for one, rehearsal, and two, how quickly some of this technique moves by, is we replicated it with more bottom jaw, replicating movement to emulate the tones that mouthpiece movement would give. In regards of like the tip of the mouthpiece will give more of a fuzzier sort of unfocused sound with like not full resonance, where more mouthpiece would be uncontrollable spread sound. And we try to emulate that more with air pressure and just overall embouchure shape and like bottom jaw position to try to emulate that. But like looking at the little snippet you have there, I mean, all that goes by in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So trying to replicate that within the context of the register section is what we tried to do. Again, like we had, I can't even remember the exact amount of rehearsals we had to produce this.
Not
product.
enough. No. I don't mean that. All right, that came out wrong. That came out bad.
No, yeah. I mean, there's only 2 or 3, I think, like 2-hour rehearsals plus outside practicing. So just again trying to make the product as good as it can in that given point. But yeah, so we kind of adjusted that accordingly to make it set the performance up for more of a successful performance.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what I meant too with my comment. I mean, because it's like something like this requires just so much rehearsal, you know? And yeah, that's exactly, that was what I was kind of asking right there too. Yeah, I mean, because like, yeah, exactly. This happens in the course of 10 seconds right here. And because all these things sort of happen in a relative temporal, you know, in relative time span. And then not only that, are you worrying about what your embouchure is doing, the register staff, which acts in a similar way, where these lines that stem down from these vertical lines that stem down from this horizontal line represent relative pitch. So the closer to this bottom line here, the lower the pitch. The closer to the line up here, the higher the pitch. So it's like you're thinking about, if we were to play this as accurately as it's represented in the score, you're thinking about where your mouth is positioned on the mouthpiece, how much air pressure you're using. These circles represent the amount of air present in the sounds, right? Yeah. and then also the register staff. So like, is it a held note? What is the pitch? Is it glissing like this slanted line here? And then the techniques within this box here, which, you know, this Z, I remember that was growling. I think this was teeth on reed, this one?
Or teeth on mouth. Yeah, teeth on reed. Yep, you're right.
Yeah. So it's like there's such a disconnect between like the typical way you would read a piece of music and what's happening in this piece here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot going on.
Yeah. Yeah, so you know, pile that onto the fact that there's only 2 or 3 rehearsals, and then you got to perform it, you know. And all of this to say is that you guys just nailed it. I mean, when I listened back to the performance like 2 or 3 days ago, I listened to it and I was like, you know, I'm gonna follow the score. I haven't looked at this in a long time, and I followed your part. I followed Amanda's part on viola, and then I followed the percussion parts, and like all of you were really nailing, like, for example, you and Amanda were getting all the contour of the pitches, right? Like you were following like low to high and like getting all the characteristic sounds and techniques that was called for and stuff. And it's just like the musicianship required to do that in that amount of time. I mean, you guys just nailed it, and it's so exciting to be able to look back on. Let's see. So I mean, here's the viola clef, which is a similar thing. She has the same sort of register staff, right? Where the pitch is represented by how far these lines come down. And then her register, instead of, you know, because she uses bow to create the sound. So this staff represents the bow position and bow pressure. So this top line is playing on the bridge. This line down here is playing over the fingerboard. And even with the violin part, it's like I asked her, I called for the amount of pressure that they were putting on the bow, how fast the bow was going across the strings, that's what these numbers represent, the position of the bow, and then I think and then these curvy lines here represent like how stable the bow is as she's bowing, like she's not shaking the hand a little, you know, like it's all this to say that you all threw this together in 2 to 3 rehearsals, and it's so exciting to look back on. I would be so excited to know if you were to perform this today, how different from the first time you performed it 5 years ago and where you were at today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because I want to get back to just talking a bit.
Yeah.
How different would that be for you?
I was thinking about that last night and this morning, because I listened to it last night and I listened to it again this morning with my coffee. Was like thinking about back to the things that I struggled with as a performer in that moment, and the things that have changed in these 5 years as far as my ability to play the saxophone. So the first thing would just be like, I would be better at the multiphonics in regards of just purity of having them come out, all the tones of them speaking, having it be super stable. Because like even I listened to the recording, some of them were cutting in and out, which was kind of cool. But again, not as you've notated it here. But I remember, I think it was Christopher Adler, who was another one that was there that helping on these indeterminate like line pitches is from, well, I guess we're calling it traditional upbringing, is I couldn't avoid just normal like diatonic tonalness to it. As far as like what I was just playing random notes, like my fingers subconsciously resorted back to just like your 12 normal chromatic notes. And through my studies, I've done a lot more stuff with quarter tones and eighth tones and stuff. I would apply a lot more of those to avoid any sort of just pitch centrality, I guess.
Right.
And using just Western 12 tones to avoid any of that, just to make it not seem like make it seem completely random, opposed to where my fingers always resorted to. Those are the big 2 things I would change. If I had more time, would be a little bit more accurate with the mouthpiece and airbox.
Oh, right.
And then just work on, because I was looking at the score, because I still have the original score from when we did it, the oversized score. Thinking about direction, I think that's something that it didn't even cross my mind when we did it, about like where these climactic points are within all the parts, and giving the randomness direction to give it forward motion and maybe pull back, and things that I would do with dynamics to help with that, because I do have some dynamics that I penciled in as we worked on it, but just bringing it more off the page, if that makes sense, in a weird way.
Yeah, well, that's amazing, man. I mean, it's so interesting to hear you talk about all this stuff. I wonder what it would be like to hear you have this conversation with your 2015 self, you know?
Yeah. 2015 me would be like, just play what's on the page, play it right, don't mess up.
Right, yeah.
Don't get lost.
I like that comment too about the directionality of it, because I mean, one thing I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen real quick, because I think this is worth mentioning with what the piece is. So in the program notes, I wrote, the concept for this piece is based off of the idea of the performer in the initial moment they come in contact with their instrument to make sound. More specifically, it is the milliseconds before a perceptible pitch can occur. During those milliseconds, the phenomenon of noise takes place. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if that's accurate, honestly. I think there might be a little bit more nuance to it. But okay. And then I give examples, like when a guitarist plucks a string, the sound of the pick or nail clicking against the string occurs the instant they come in contact. Or a percussionist percussionist hitting a hard material that reverberates with a wooden drumstick. Prior to reverberation, the sound of the objects connecting occurs. Or when a violist glides the bow across the strings before the string can fluctuate enough for pitch to take place. It is simply the sound of the bow rubbing against the string. And so your comment about the directionality of what's happening, I mean, even, actually, this is the section I wanted to get into, the second paragraph. Within the phenomenon of noise exists instability. Rhythm, dynamics, and to a degree, pitch is inconstant. Timbre depends on the two connecting materials in question. Bow versus string will be different from pick versus string. Noise is at the heart of this piece, but more specifically, the instability that makes noise possible is the real driving force of what this piece represents. So that's that last point there was what I kind of wanted to get at, because it's like your comment about directionality and the randomness of it, even random sounds or objects or anything that's chaotic can have a direction or will have a direction in some way, you know? Like water flowing down a hill is very random in the direction that it goes or the path that it takes. But in many ways it's not, because it's being dictated by the objects that are in the way. So you can almost kind of make a relative prediction as to where it's going to go, you know? And so with this piece, it's like each part on its own can probably exist independently of the work itself, you know?
Yeah.
And with that in mind, then I kind of wonder what it would be like if this were to be performed as 4 soloists performing together, as opposed to an ensemble creating this homogeneous piece, you know?
Yeah, I think that would be I think you'd be surprised at how vastly different it might sound.
Oh my God.
I would be too. Because like even listening to the recording, there are times where, as an ensemble, you can sense that forward direction. Like it's leading to something. Like the part that always gets me is the homage to John Cage at the 4:33 second mark. But like you hear things leading to that, like the seconds that precede that, and then there's that silence and the initial contact, so to speak, of that re-entrance for that 15 seconds or whatever, like how, or I guess it'd be 27 seconds, like how all of that, it is giving a sense of direction where I think that might not come across. It might come across if it was just 4 soloists that recorded independently. Oh, maybe a neat experiment to do.
That's an interesting one. Well, the thing too is that, the homage, the tip of the hat to John Cage, right? Like, I'm gonna share my screen again real quick just to show that section right there, because I think it's an interesting moment right here. So you can see the timestamps above, and then right there, 4 minutes and 33 seconds, there's the first moment of silence in the entire piece. And it happens for 8 seconds. And the reason why is because John Cage died when he was 80. So I just sort of made that connection there. But this is actually an interesting moment in the performance. I have the video pulled up, I think. I want to go to it because, let's see here. And the timestamp should be pretty accurate too, actually. Actually, can you hear this?
Yeah.
You can hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things I love is Eric's face when he went during that pause, when Eric goes to reach for the thing, he is going for it, and nothing is gonna stop him. I'm gonna play that moment real quick. I had to leave that keep playing. I had to let that play because I love the way you guys ended that.
Yeah.
It was awesome how you and Amanda more or less met, like pitch wise, you know?
Yeah. And that probably would never happen again.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah, there were so many things in that performance that like things that have never happened before. I guess maybe they did. I don't know, but you never recorded and listened back because you're so in the moment that like just lined up.
mm-hmm.
But I think that's just like the innate musicianship of trying to play chamber music, of making it, even though it is random per se, it's still a cohesive 4-part unit to make the piece come together.
Yeah, man. I mean, even because I'm just gonna check the time real quick. All right. We used timers for it, right? Like like cell phones and stuff.
Yeah, I think all of us had iPads.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. It was like positioned under the score.
So there were 3 stands. So each, at least Amanda and I had 2 stands with our iPad underneath, and it was to initiate the piece was just and we just started the timer and use that as a guide.
Yeah. Oh man. It's that. I mean, that right there. It's already like I can completely see the disconnect that makes in a performance, because it's like what you were just saying, where as an ensemble you're connecting and you're listening for each other and stuff like that, but then you have to kind of look down and check the time, you know, which in my mind that's like that would take me out of what I'm doing, you know, because now I'm thinking about something other than that. Right. But yeah, the thing is like with a piece like this, I mean, obviously it's not rhythmically notated. So unless there's like a click in your ear, that might be a way around it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I know at least in my score, I can't speak for the other performers, is I did mark like halfway points in the larger timestamps just so I had checkpoints.
Mm-hmm.
Even it was cool because we were able to run the piece enough in rehearsals that I could get a good sense of like how to pace so that I wasn't ahead or behind. But yeah, just kind of writing in cues for like, this is when this performer does this sort of technique and like use that as a cueing point. Even if it doesn't line up, that's fine, but it's a cueing point to make sure that I'm not getting ahead nor behind.
Right, yeah. Oh my God. So many levels of just coordination that's taking place.
Yeah.
I have to say too, huge shout out to Amanda and like huge props to her, because I remember talking to her at the time and she was saying like, she's almost, I think, strictly played the traditional canon of classical music. And I don't remember if she said she's played anything by a living composer at that time. I feel like I think I recall her saying that she's played like early 20th century and stuff. So like this was a huge step for her. And she just, you know, she took it head on and like, you know, like all the overpressure stuff and like the quick bow movements and everything like that. Because at the very beginning of the piece, like a little bit over a minute into it, she has like this kind of cadenza. Mm-hmm. And my initial idea for this piece was each instrument was going to have a cadenza, but then it kind of turned into like, how am I going to fit all that in 5 minutes, you know? And so she kind of ended up being the only one with a cadenza.
Yeah, no, I thought it was super cool and effective, just the cadenza and the techniques used within that, which kind of leads into like this softer wispy stuff where I've got the teeth on radiant, just kind of this like scooting around the high note. So it's like this intense viola cadenza into this kind of like meandering, mousy sort of thing that leads back into controlled chaos.
Yeah, I like that, controlled chaos. Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of what it is. It's oh man. So I'm so glad to have had done all of that and you know like have the opportunity to work with people like you and Amanda and Eric on a piece like this, because I mean, like I said before, I haven't written anything like it, but as you know, a creative and a composer and stuff like that, writing this piece has drastically altered the way that I approach composing and stuff and what I think about. And so it's, you know, I feel I'm so fortunate to have gotten to work with you guys and be at Nief-Norf at that time. And like everything just kind of lined up beautifully, you know?
Yeah. It was, like I said, it's a very memorable experience and a very crucial point in to leading to where I am, and I would assume you are today, as far as where we are in our careers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to go back, like, and approach it with this newfound growth that I've gained over the past 5 years, just from a maturity standpoint in regards of music, and just like a facility aspect on my instrument, and come in sort of swinging, thinking that I'm in the right weight class, opposed to punching above the weight. Referring back to the analogy I used earlier, but yeah, man, it was crazy. It was very life changing.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was crazy. That's like, there's really it was crazy.
Yeah.
So what have you what have you been working on as of lately in regard, you know, like we're talking all this stuff about like these crazy disconnect of what the fingers and the mouth and the embouchure is doing and stuff like that, but like what sort of repertoire have you been playing lately since graduating graduate school?
Yeah, so I had to record my whole recital in August, and I kind of like took a week or two off, just because like that whole experience was frustrating to have to record it remotely and like not be having the experience of being able to perform it live. It was kind of disheartening, but yeah, I took a couple weeks off, and right now I've just been working on just like fun rep, I guess, and I'm not even like seriously working on it. Like I'm working on the Wagner Rhapsody just for fun, and then Maslanka's Sonata, just to try to upkeep technique. Because after my undergrad, I spent a lot of time just working. I was teaching a lot. I was working in a music store, and I lost a lot of what I gained in my undergrad. And that's one thing that I'm going to make sure does not happen after the completion of this degree is getting busy with work and then letting everything that I just spent 2 years of my life getting better at, letting it just all go away. Even though, you know, you can get to that point, you can get to it faster, but like just trying to upkeep. And it's really frustrating to like work on stuff knowing that there's nothing to work towards, performance wise. So yeah, just trying to upkeep my technique and get better at every, I guess you could say, traditional aspect, like being able better at playing in tune, intonation, just overall technique, overall control, so that when things do return to normal, I can just hit the ground running with all this ability, I guess you can say, or upkeep of techniques that you can just attack anything. Does that make sense in a roundabout way?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's great, man. I mean, it's like, you know, in music school we're trained to always be striving to do these, like, you know, work on these huge pieces that like you said earlier, like way earlier in the conversation, like the music of the masters, or like that the performers that we all idolize and stuff like that. And it's like, oh my God, they put that to perfection, you know? But then having, like you said, like kind of taking a step back, I'm like, I'm just going to play these things that I like to play, or at least just something that is just, you know, I enjoy it. And at the same time, I'm going to be focusing on the upkeep of, you know, maintaining technique and intonation and all that other stuff, you know?
Yeah.
You got to take a step back. Like you can't, and that's something that I always have to remind myself, because I don't, is like, you can't always redline, you know? Can't always be on.
Yeah, like as a musician, it's real easy to, I mean, we're all yes people. We say yes to everything, and it's really hard to say no. because you feel like you're losing out on a potential connection. You're losing out on potential money. Just because I said no to this one person for this thing, even if I've already committed something and you have to say no because you're committed to something else, like you feel like they're never going to ask you again because you said no in that instance.
Right.
Because it's you don't want to lose any connections, and you want to try to do everything you can, but you also don't want to burn out. I mean, burnout rate is real, and it's something we don't think about until we've beyond burnout. And then you don't enjoy what you're doing, and you don't have ambition to do it. Because if you burn out, like, you're frustrated picking up your instrument or grabbing that manuscript paper if you're a composer, and then what you're doing is not good because you're frustrated and you're doing it out of spite or out of necessity. So just trying to find that joy of doing this because you know you like to do it, but when it becomes a job, it's really hard to balance that. It's a job, but this is where my passion lies. So that you're not doing it for the sake of just having to do it.
Dude, you hit so many nails on the head with that one. And I have to say that I think people need to hear that. Are you cool with me sharing that whole sound clip right there and putting it out there so people can get that, advice?
Yeah, because and in addition to that, like, school, you're just doing what you're told, and you're doing it because there is an objective at the end. But also, like, remembering why you're doing this in the first place. You're doing it because you like it, and especially like in undergrad, and I experienced it a lot in my graduate studies, is like literally getting the heart out of the case because I have to, and then like accomplishing nothing because I'm doing it because I have to, opposed to like doing it because I want to, if that makes sense. And burnout's a scary thing because some people burn out and then will never come back.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, because it's so much easier to give into like negativity, like feeling those bitter and resentful emotions is easier than putting in the harder work of finding the silver lining in things. I mean, it's the same thing. And this isn't any disrespect or anything thrown at anyone, but like, it's a lot harder to work out and exercise. It takes more willpower than it does to just kind of sit down and eat food all day,
Yeah.
And that's, like I said, that's not an insult or anything. I mean, like, I love cake. Like, I love pizza. I eat this stuff like as often as I can, and I work out like very periodically. I'm not very regimented with it and stuff like that. But these sort of things, it's like it's so much harder to I don't know what you say, like the whole positivity of it all, like to, I don't know, self-improvement, right? Like,
yeah, because like I know for a fact I have burned bridges unintentionally. Some of them recent, some of them in the past, and I dwell on that, and I feel bad because I've let the stress of what is going on in my life and in that current moment dictate how I approach things. And yeah, it sucks, and I don't mean to show disrespect to anybody, and I'm pretty sure I've apologized to anyone that I have in the past, because like we're all human, we all let things get to us, and some people handle it better than others, and the best thing you can do is realize what has happened and not dwell on it, but allow that to inform your future decisions.
right.
In regards of like not being disrespectful, not leaving somebody out, not talking down about anybody or to anybody, even if you are like in an instructor student position, just because that student isn't carrying their weight, you still want to inspire them, and you don't want to talk down to them to allow them to achieve this frustration burnout point. If they come to that realization on their own, awesome, good for them, but it should never be coerced by an outside force, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and that was incredibly clear. It's that I think is part of the trouble too, and relating that all back to music school and stuff like that. It's like my personal experience I went through 3 different colleges for music degrees and everything. I don't ever recall a professor saying that you have to do this, you have to do that in order to get to this step. I think a lot of that stuff, at least for me, was like self-imposed, to think like I need to be doing this because that's what people want or whatever. But when you look at the careers of people who are quite successful and are thriving, they're all incredibly diverse in regards to what they're doing. I mean, it's like the music and I'm a composer, like, I know composers, I'm a composer. So like, I know more composers than I can name performers and stuff like that, right? But I mean, look at the music of like Sarah Kirkland Schneider, and then the music of, I don't know, Ashley Fury, or like, I don't know, another contemporary, Alex Minchek, right? Like all of them have vastly different careers, vastly different music, but all of them are thriving, and I think part of that is because they didn't exactly decide, like, fall within any specific like, mold, whatever you want to say. And and like what you were saying before, where that, like, the whole burnout and stuff like that, like this is probably what they're doing is what they love. They enjoy doing the styles and the things that they experiment with, and so I don't imagine that at any point for them it's been like, oh, I gotta go to work today and write a piece of music, I mean, I'm sure there was some burnout along the way where it's like a lot to do and exhaustion setting in, but that's with anything.
Yeah, and I can only speak on music. So when I say what I'm about to say, I mean, I cannot relate it to any other profession because I've never experienced it. But the stress of like music is real. And because like even in regards of like the current situation we're in right now with COVID, is like every form of arts has just been shut down to absolutely nothing in a heartbeat. And the stress of that's weighing on a lot of people, because I think I saw like the Met Opera isn't going to return until fall of 2021. Like that's income. That's something that somebody spent their entire life doing. And I know there are many other jobs that have shut down. So I'm just relating just to music. So if anyone is like, oh my gosh, what is he saying? But like finding a way to turn that stress into motivation opposed to letting it shut you down. And like we were talking about with like Zoom and everything, how it's opened all these avenues of collaboration, like using that positive energy and motivation to create something new or to keep things going, opposed to just accepting defeat in a regard. It's a stressful thing because like there's never a point where you can become complacent because there's no aspect of music that is. And I'm not saying that there is with other jobs either, but like you're always trying to make a better student. You're always trying to play harder rep. You're always trying to make yourself better. And as a composer, I'm assuming you're always trying to make better music. You're always trying to make bigger music, bigger works, and trying to like push yourself. You have to beat your previous self in a sense. It's that isn't what attributes to burnout. I think that's a part of it. It's hard.
Yeah, that's so true and well put. Yeah, it's especially during this time, like you said, with COVID, it's prevalent, and and so all of us are definitely trying to figure out how we're going to deal with all this and what we're doing and stuff, and things are, gradually opening and opportunities are increasing, I think, because now we're all sort of used to it in a way. I don't want to say used to it, but it's like
we're learning to work with it.
Yeah.
We're all becoming more knowledgeable about what we can do and what we can't do. And we're being innovative in the means to be able to still do what we do of being safe.
Yeah, that's exactly. This froze up for a second there, but can you hear me?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I got you. Yeah, I am too.
I just wanted to make sure it was still good. Yeah, man, this is all really great stuff, and like so many things that you said within this whole conversation, I think is just so useful for a lot of people. But so one last question I want to ask you is how are there any things that you do to try to make sure that you're still focusing on just being okay and like doing the things that you want to be doing, or like things you feel like you should be doing? Or
Yeah, so that's a good question, because like there's been a lot of reflection over the past 6 months. A lot of I wouldn't say depression, but depressing thoughts in regards of like what is going to happen, and is everything that I just did, everything that I've done, is that all for naught? For the time being, because like you can only go so long with doing nothing in regards of like work and income and stuff. Just trying to do what makes you happy in regards of like going back to the roots of why you're doing what you're doing. Like, why do I play saxophone? Why did I go get a performance degree? Why am I doing this? And when you can answer that question as to why, because I enjoy it, because I enjoy teaching saxophone lessons. I enjoy collaborating with other musicians and getting to meet people like everyone that we met at Nief-Norf in 2015, and finding a way to accommodate some of those means on your own, in your own practice. So like, yeah, the two pieces I'm working on right now are hard, but I'm also doing them because I enjoy them. Would they have sufficed for my studies? Yeah. But did I work on them? No. But I'm just kind of like slapping something on the stand and playing with the idea of I have no performance for this. I don't have to make it perfect. I can just enjoy working on it and going back. Because I mean, I think as musicians, we all enjoy practicing. We don't when we're in school because we're being forced to sometimes, but finding that fun and just getting your horn out and working on something. And I'm assuming it would be the same thing with as a composer, is getting a blank piece of manuscript out and just jotting down ideas with no end goal in mind. Just what can I come up with? And who knows, it might create something incredible with no aspiration or deadline to be able to create something incredible.
Fantastic, man. I love all of that. I think that's actually a really good spot to stop the recording here. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop that. Unless, is there anything else you want to tag on there? And
I don't have too much necessarily. I yapped a lot, so kind of talking in circles a little bit there at the end. But hey,
no. Well, that was definitely the point of this.